This is called a proofing banneton. I think it is made of bamboo. It is very expensive. I do not know why. I think people just got onto the sourdough craze. But have you ever thought of starting your sourdough journey? And everyone talks about how cheap it is to bake. You need flour, water, and salt, and then Bob's your uncle. But have you ever thought of all the other little things that you need in order to bake this bread? In this video, I'd like to share with you step by step what you will need. Most of these items are already in your kitchen, and so the breakdown that I would share with you right at the end will show you if you had nothing, if you started from zero, what would the cost be of equipping your kitchen in order to bake sourdough? There's some really, really cheap options, and there's some really expensive options, and then there's something in between. So stick around and see which one you would like to start with in order for you to start baking. Step one is your starter. Your starter is made up of flour and water, and we store our sourdough in a glass container with a lid. But this is what you will need for your starter. Then when we get to the second feed, you will need a bigger jar because you are now creating your starter and feeding it for the volume that you would need for your recipe. We have this glass one that I bought quite a while ago. It wasn't very expensive. The lid actually came with one of those rubber sealants. I just pulled the seal off so that it can breathe just a little bit, but you would need something to store your sourdough in that is covered as well. What I like about this one is that I can actually see the rise of the starter. What's difficult about this one is that because it has this ridge, it was really hard to decant into the recipe and still get a clean cut off, if that makes sense. And so then it forms a crust and it gets hard and it's really difficult to clean. That is until I saw that somebody online actually did her feed in a plastic container. So I didn't think that you could use plastic for sourdough. It seems like it doesn't really make a difference. If you know any better, please put it in the comments. And so I would do my second feed in this plastic container. Now you don't need to buy one. You can see that this is just a used yogurt container, but it works so well. And I use everything that I need. And so then it just, goes back into to be washed and it's ready for the next feed. And so this, I haven't used this in a while because I've gone onto this system. So again, you can make it as expensive as you want. Just make sure that before you use your starter, just to scoop out a spoon or two and just put it into a clean jar again and then put that back into the fridge. So this is how we maintain our starter. The rest we use. Then it's on to the ingredients. And so a sourdough bread takes your starter plus flour, salt, and water. So I have flour and salt here. And then you will need a kitchen scale. I would recommend that you get one of these. A digital one is fine. One with a flat surface, so not one with those little baskets on. And really that is because when you measure your flour for the recipes, flour can compact in the packaging. And so sometimes when you scoop out 1 cup, it is actually quite a bit more flour. That is why a recipe for sourdough usually has grams in for the flour. And I would say using a digital scale really helps with that. The next step is to mix all of your ingredients. So we have some options here. This is the least expensive option, a picnic salad bowl. Very inexpensive, and it came with a lid, which is quite nice because in between your stretch and folds, you want to cover your dough. So this one makes it quite nice for you to not have to buy anything else, and it works very well. The only thing that I don't like about it is because it's plastic and it's so lightweight, when you want to do your stretch and fold, it usually, like the whole bowl comes along with the dough. So you would have to use one hand for holding and one hand for stretching. But other than that, I really like this option, especially if I have more than one baking project at one time. I would definitely pull out this one. This is the second option. It is a glass bowl, much heavier, but also one that I already had in the kitchen, so I didn't have to buy it. You can buy them online from very inexpensive to super expensive, depending on your taste. So this is the option that I most often use when I do hand mixing. So you put all of your ingredients in here, and then what I like to do is stir it. Now, you can get one of those fancy dough whisks. Have not bought one of those. I don't think it's necessary, but if you like it, then by all means put in the comments why you like your dough whisk and if we should try them. Again, I'm not affiliated to any of these products that we will speak about today. It purely is just what I have been using that I already had in the kitchen. So I have found that once you take off this little silicone top, that it is a very sturdy stirring stick. Gosh, say that quickly. A very sturdy stirring stick. And so I usually use this to do the mixing with the initial mixing and then scrape that off, and then I go in with my hands. Now, I do that because I don't really like the feeling of liquid and flour separate. I don't mind if it becomes a dough and it starts sticking to each other, then I don't mind it. So it helps me. Do you need it? Absolutely not. You can go in with your hands from the start, and you don't need anything else for that. What I would say is when you do mixing with your hands is that sometimes the flour feels like it is not absorbing the liquid, and so it feels quite dry. If you do feel that that is the case with your dough, just cover it for 20 minutes or so. It gives the flour just opportunity to suck in more of the moisture. And then when you go in again, you should find that the dough a lot more manageable in terms of that. Now, the age-old question is, do you need a mixer? The short answer is no. I bought mine secondhand, and so to me it was a good investment, but I would think twice to buy a new one, especially if you are buying it for the dough of doing your sourdough. What is nice about using a mixer is that you have about 10 to 20 minutes that you don't need to be in the kitchen while this is just mixing the dough. I sometimes put it on and go make the beds or finish getting ready for the day. Once your mixer has done the initial mix, you will still need to put it into a bowl where you can do your stretches and folds. So in this example, like I said, we don't need an additional lid, but with an open bowl, you will need a lid. You can use a cloth. So it really is just to make sure nothing falls in, and also to create a little bit of an environment in there where the proofing can happen. I usually use these bowl covers. Now again, this is a disposable one. I will use it for a set of the baking that I do for the day. You can also find some reusable ones online, some that are cotton, some that are beeswax, but this is what I use. If you don't need it, this cloth will work just as well. Actually, in the winter, I like to cover the bowl and then add a little bit of extra protection for warmth. Pro tip, if you look for cloths online to use, because you are looking for 100% cotton, if you type in 100% cotton dishcloths, you will find a much cheaper variety than when you put in 100% cotton tea towels. I don't know why a tea towel is so much more expensive. Please do explain in the comments if you know. But a dishcloth will work just as well as a tea towel. Now that your mixing is done and your dough has gone through the bulk fermentation stage, what you need to do now is to shape your dough and get it ready for the overnight proofing in the fridge. So to shape your dough, you will need some flour and a hard surface. Turn out your dough from your mixing bowl. You will shape it and then put it into your proofing basket. And now we will talk about the different proofing equipment that you would need. So I will start with the most expensive option. This is called a proofing banneton. I think it is made of bamboo. It is very expensive. I do not know why. I think people just got onto the sourdough craze, but you can buy these online. They are quite expensive. Something to be mindful of is when you see this online and it says it's a two-piece, do not, like me, think it's going to be two baskets. It's a basket plus a liner. I don't use this very often, and so I don't know where my liner is. so I cannot show you. A second option is just a plastic fruit basket. I bought this at a local shop, but I do see that you can find them online as well. Very inexpensive. It is about 1/10 of the price of this one, and it does exactly the same thing. So it's supposed to hold the shape of the dough. Another option, if you really don't want to go out and buy something, is to use your kitchen sieve. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you call it where you live. And so this one you can also use inside the mixing bowl that you have. So the purpose of it really is just to keep the shape of the dough while it goes into the fridge for the fermentation process or the proofing overnight. And so you would rest it inside of your mixing bowl. And again, this is the you don't need to buy anything else option. You can buy cotton liners to put inside of your baskets, or you can again just use your cloth. And so you would line your basket with the cloth, you will dust it with flour, and that really is so that it doesn't stick to the dough. And so it doesn't matter if you put it in this basket, or here inside your sieve. It works exactly the same. So you will dust it with flour, and then once your dough is inside, you will close it up and it is ready to go into the fridge. The final option is to have your dough sit overnight in the loaf pan that you are going to use for baking. There is a disclaimer for that though. This is a silicone pan, and so it doesn't conduct the cold as much as a tin would. When we get to the different baking options, then I will speak about heating up your pan. But this doesn't have to go through that process. And so I sometimes do it straight in here, and then I will use the same dough bowl cover I will reuse here. This is my go-to option, but I sometimes do it in there. One thing that I do want to talk about is a dough scraper or a dough cutter. I have these two options. This is the first one that I bought. It comes in a set of 3, very inexpensive. It's bendable. What I like about this one, when you do your mixing, this one has a really nice shape to just scrape off all those sides so that the dough is fully incorporated. So I really like it for that. Sharp enough to actually cut through your dough when you want to divide into portions. So it really is a nice one. The thing that I don't like about this one is that when you try and clean, so use it as a dough scraper to clean, it doesn't clean as well. But a solid option. This is a dough scraper or a bench scraper. It is much sharper. I don't think it will cut you. And it has really, really sharp, pointy sides. Really cuts dough very well and scrapes a surface clean as new. So those are the positives. What I don't like about it is I can only use it on a flat surface and not necessarily in my bowl. So it really is hard to scrape all the dough to incorporate it. If I could only choose one of the two, I would probably go with this one. So your dough has now been in the fridge overnight. It is ready to be baked. The first thing you will do is to put your dough out onto the surface. It should have a nice shape still from the basket that it was in. And now you can score your dough. So dust it with some flour. And this is what we call the scoring tool. You need something to hold the blade that's actually going to cut into your dough. So this blade is a razor blade, so it's very sharp. But this is what you'll need to draw those really intricate patterns on top of your dough. And it comes with a little safety jacket. And they have different types. A small one that you just, like a little round one that you hold in your hand, or you can have these ones. If you feel that you don't need a scoring tool, you probably don't have to. I have seen friends actually just grab that blade and actually just do their scoring. I am too scared to do that, but it is definitely an option if you feel that you are up for it. So now your dough is ready to go into the oven. We will look at different options for baking. This is a little Dutch oven, which really is just a cast iron pot. You will need some parchment paper or baking paper to line your pot with. You can find dough lifters, I think is what it's called. And the reason for that is your Dutch oven needs to go into the oven and preheat with your oven. So once you use it, it's going to be very, very hot. So be mindful of that. Put it on your dough liner or on your parchment paper, and you slide it into the pot and you close it. Now this is going to create steam inside, and so that's why it's covered. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you can always mimic a Dutch oven. So, well, this is the option that I most often use, is my silicone pans. And again, I've used these silicone pans quite a bit. Pro tip, when you buy silicone, is be mindful of the temperature that it can handle, right? So sourdough is baked at a very high temperature. So just make sure that yours can take the high heat. This is quite a sturdy one. I have found in shops, I have found silicone that's very soft. I would just stay away from those ones, but just be mindful on the packaging when you do decide to buy that. So what I like to do is spritz a bit of water in the top of the silicone pan, and then I will close it up and it will mimic a little Dutch oven for the first half of the bake. My water spritzer is just a glass bottle. You can buy them online. You need very little water, so it doesn't have to be this big. It can literally be 100 ml bottle, so you don't need to have a big one. I know that some of the micro bakers, they have those sprayers, which I think is awesome, but I don't know where to find them, so I couldn't even give you a picture of that. This will be your second option, is just to use a normal baking loaf tin. Also works really well. You will again need some parchment paper. So once you have scored your dough, you can actually pick it up and put it in here, and it will take the shape of your loaf pan. You can cover it to make a little Dutch oven again, or you can just bake it like that. In that option, you do need to add some steam into your oven, and so you can just use a smaller tin, one that you don't usually use very often. Fill it with some hot water, and then when you put that into the oven, it will create steam, and then that will create a conducive environment for your sourdough to cook inside of your oven. The last option is to bake directly onto a baking sheet. Lots of ovens come with those baking trays, and you can absolutely bake on that. It is very thin though, and so it heats up quite quickly at the bottom. So just be mindful to not put it too low into the oven. Again, because it is an open loaf, you will need to add your water in a suitable container that can go into the oven for that. And then you don't need any of this additional equipment to bake your bread. One tip though is that when you start your sourdough journey, your dough might sometimes not play along very well. So when it is in a container, it contains the shape quite nicely. If it is just out on a baking tray, it might lose its shape and it will flatten out. And that really is just something that you will learn as you go along. If you feel that you don't want that to ever happen, then I would suggest using some of the other options. This seems to be a good time to talk about the different options for baking your sourdough. Most South African homes come out with an oven already built into the kitchen, and so you don't need an additional appliance in order to bake your sourdough. If that is not the case where you live, I do suggest you invest in a countertop oven. There are varieties available, starting from under 1,000 Rand all the way to 15,000 Rand, depending on the style that you like, but that would work as well. A standard oven in South Africa is about 5,000 watts. This countertop version usually is 3,000 watts, and so it will use less energy. It also heats up a little bit quicker, and so your time using electricity is a little bit less. But absolutely, you do not need any additional equipment if you already have an oven. 45 minutes have passed, and so your bread is ready to come out of the oven. What you would need once it comes out is a cooling rack. Most households already have some form of cooling rack. You don't need a specific one, a fancy one, as long as it's slightly elevated off your surface and it isn't solid, so that it allows for the bread to actually release heat from the bottom, then that is all you need, and your cooling rack will be fine. Then when it is time to cut into it, you will need something just to protect your surface. If you have a stone top counter and you're used to cutting it on there, then that's fine as well. But if you don't, just a normal cutting board will be fine. I have a wooden one, so I didn't need to buy a new one. And our knife, I think my husband got it before we even got married. So it's a really old knife, but it works fine. It's just a bread knife. I have probably in the last year seen this new sourdough bread knife. I don't think you need it. If somebody gifts it to you as a present, then absolutely take it. But you do not need to buy a special bread to slice your sourdough. So in summary, we have gone through the starter process, the mixing process, the proofing process, what you would need for baking, and also the post-baking process. I think it is quite worthwhile looking at all of these hidden costs when we look at sourdough. And even when you compare all of these costs and you get to this answer, our cheap option is just over 1,000 Rand. Assuming that you, like us, bake 2 loaves a week, your equipment will last a year, which it probably will last much longer than that. But just for this example, for each loaf, you will pay an additional 10 Rand 31 in order to recoup the costs of your investment. That still brings your total sourdough loaf to just over 24 Rand per bread. For our international friends, that is less than $2. And compare that to a store-bought artisanal sourdough for about $8, or in our case, 55 Rand. That is still a huge saving. Bear in mind, this is only going to be for the first year. After that, your equipment has been paid off, and the cost of your sourdough will go down to ingredients and utilities. So I still think it is absolutely worth your money to invest in the small things you need to make your sourdough journey even more comfortable, but you do not need to go to absolutely extreme and have the best of the best before you start. Well, I really hope that you found this encouraging in order to start with what you have, where you are, and then slowly building it up to just incorporate those little items that would make your sourdough journey even more comfortable. If you enjoyed this video, then do subscribe and give us a comment on what you would like us to maybe do a full costing on next. We look forward to seeing you.